Good evening. I'm Ramya, MPhil Scholar, Department of English, QMC, Coordinator and Compare of this evening intended session. Today our webinar topic is Indian Diaspora. Our chairperson for this evening symposium is Dr. Uma Jayaraman, Academic Writing, CELC, National University of Singapore. We are grateful to Dr. Aparna Srinivas, Director, Emerald Dove Learning, for introducing Dr. Uma Jayaraman to us at Queen Mary's College. Dr. Uma Jayaraman read English Literature at Delhi University, India and National University of Singapore. Since then, she has taught English Literature in India, Indonesia and Singapore and co-taught with faculty from University of London and MIT. For her doctoral thesis, she worked on Indian diasporic novels written on the threshold of the 21st century and received the Best Thesis Award for her work in this discipline. Since then, she has been invited to speak and examine doctoral theses on her area of specialization. She has also published both critical and creative works on diaspora. Dr. Uma Jayaraman currently lives and teaches academic writing in Singapore. Dr. Uma Jayaraman has been a theatre practitioner since her university days in the 1980s, but she took to professional theatre in 1998. She has written and directed Tamil and English plays for performance and competitions and has won prizes for her work. She writes about social issues but in a light-hearted way. More recently, she has taken to exploring mental health in women. Last year, Dr. Uma Jayaraman launched her own theatre company called Roots. We welcome you, ma'am. I deem an honor to welcome Ms. Sangeetha, Director, the Queen's Theatre, the Queen Mary's College, who is going to reading excerpt from Nirad Chaudhuri. Next, I welcome Dr. Vinitha Francis, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Queen Mary's College, Chennai, who is going to turn our attention to the deeper meaning of Enjaami. Next, I welcome our two paper presenters of our symposium, Mrs. P.M. Vasugi, Assistant Professor of English, Queen Mary's College, and Dr. S. Priya Dharisini, Assistant Professor, Department of English, KCS Nadar College of Arts and Science, Chennai. Now I invite our chairperson, Dr. Uma Jayaraman, to take over the proceedings of this session.
Hey, thank you, Ramya. Thanks so much for the introduction. So welcome everyone for the symposium, and I hope we make up for lost time quickly. And thanks for moving it forward at such short notice as well. Just very quickly, what I thought we could do was we could start off with the two creative presentations first. And I just wanted to step in at that point in time and maybe say a couple of things about my experience with Diaspora before we go on to the paper presentation for the day. And then I hope that will work well. So we will start off with the two creative presentations in the order that's presented here. We'll start with M. Sangeetha, who is a guest lecturer in the Department of Queen Mary's College from 2016. And just a few words which I have here from all of you about Sangeetha. So she is a theatre enthusiast from her post-graduation days and a mentee of Dr. David Wesley, assistant professor at MCC. She started training students of QMC, Department of English in Theatre from 2019. And here I read a quote that has been put up for us. The eternal silence of these infinite spaces terrifies me. Resonates the Indian urge to start a conversation with a fellow traveler. Similar to Nirad Chaudhuri, Nirad Chaudhuri normalizes the nature of Indians who don't hesitate to break the silence between individuals despite cultural differences. After all, Indians don't just treat fellow Indians as brothers and sisters. So that's Sangeetha, who will present an excerpt from Nirad Chaudhuri. And I'm just going to, at the same time, introduce Vinitha so that they both can then go together, if that's okay. And here I have, let me quickly see where I have Vinitha's. To be efficient, I actually downloaded all of it. And I realized that it's, okay, never mind. Give me a second, please. Okay, here it is. So the second creative presentation will be by Dr. P. Vinitha Francis, who's currently working as assistant professor of English in Queen Mary's College. She's also the organizing secretary for all the clubs in the college. In 1998, she received the gold medal from the governor, Fatima Bibi, for securing university first rank with distinction in BA English Literature from Bharatiyar University. She completed her doctorate in 2009 and has researched on contemporary writers of Indian fiction. She's been teaching for the past 20 years. She was also part of a 4-member team along with Dr. Preeti in drafting State RUSA, which is Rashtriya Uchatar Siksha Abhiyan plan for Tamil Nadu. She has co-authored 2 textbooks for engineering students. She has contributed a chapter in the book World in Your Stride, published by Tamil Nadu State Government. She was also a resource person in 2 workshops organized by Tamil Nadu State Council for Higher Education. So today she's going to highlight for us on the theme of diaspora in the Tamil popular song, Enjoy Enjaami. Over to the 2 creative speakers today.
Good evening, ma'am, and thank you so much for the introduction. It's a pleasure doing this presentation in this forum. Thank you so much. And thank you, Preeti ma'am, for the opportunity and all those who are here in the meet today. Thank you so much. And let me straight away get into the reading. The eternal silence of these infinite crowds. When visiting England, I was almost accompanied by an English friend, and if not, I was furnished with introductions. Therefore, the question of worming my way through the notorious English reserve did not arise in my case. I was not wholly reassured, however, by the easy clearing of the first hurdle and feared that difficulties might crop up at a later stage. For among us in India, the coldness comes after and not before the introduction. But in England, I came across no chilliness or formality and was never put in my place even by important people. I shall speak about this later. Here I am concerned only with the public behavior of the English people. In India, heartiness is found more in the public intercourse of men than in private social relations. Moreover, for us noise is essential, a condition of cheerfulness, as is the warmth of the sun. For this reason, I was not surprised to read a very angry letter published in one of our newspapers shortly after my return from abroad, in which the writer, a countryman of mine, complained about the silent habits of the English people. He wrote with burning hatred of their behavior in the underground trains, where they could think of nothing better to do than to bury their faces in their newspapers. A sailor perishing in the Arctic Ocean could not have felt more strongly about the icebergs. A passage to England. I had heard about this habit before I went to England, but to meet the silence of first hand was a wholly novel experience. Life in London, even in the most crowded streets, seemed like a film of pre-talkie days. I had an uncanny sensation when I saw unending streams of people going along Oxford Street and heard no sound. As they moved into the underground stations, they looked like long lines of ants going into their holes. When after living in the bazaars of India for years, I saw a sight little that it was only natural that I should paraphrase Pascal and cry out, "The eternal silence of these infinite crowds frightens me." I met the same silence when from the streets I went into the pubs or restaurants. Both can be crowded at lunchtime, but I had no conversation. In India, on the contrary, such places would be buzzing or even booming with talk. Speaking of the clubs, though regarded as centers of social life, they are perhaps the most silent places of all. One evening, when dining at a club, I tried in my innocence to open a conversation across the table, and I admired the skill with which the intrusion was fended off without the slightest suggestion of discourtesy. The transport system of Delhi, which is owned by the government and in which I have gone about for more than 15 years, is very illuminating. In the buses of Delhi, all of us make use of one another for bodily comfort. In northern India, people have very great difficulty in keeping steady in moving vehicles, and therefore they lean against one another or put their arms around a fellow passenger. Nobody is so ill-natured as to mind being used as a cushion, and if anyone with a wholly alien notion of private ownership in respect of his body objects. He is asked in offended tones, "What harm is there in it? You are not a woman." Again, if anyone wants to know the time and doesn't have a watch, he simply takes up the left hand of another passenger and looks at his watch. I wear mine underside, and therefore my wrist is twisted. The buses are also full of conversation, not only on public topics, but also on embarrassingly private ones, and not only between acquaintances, but also between people who have never met before. Among the former, jokes are loud and hearty, and they are also permissible between total strangers. One day, a fellow passenger looked at my large solar topi and remarked that it was heavier than my whole body. And when I replied that it was no bigger than his turban, he said that he hoped I was not offended at his joke. Another day, I had an anxious inquiry about my health. In the hot season, I sometimes get an irritation at the back of my neck, especially because I wear a collar and I tie even then, and this makes me jerk my head and even perk like a bird. Last summer, I had an attack of this, and when traveling in the bus, I suddenly heard a gentleman sitting next to me asking me in English, "Is it a habit or is it a disease?" As I was somewhat surprised by the question and could not at first understand what it was about, he repeated the query. I asked in my turn, "What is habit or disease?" Then the gentleman mimicked me exactly and said, "This." I was bound in common politeness to reply, "I suppose it is a habit." "I thought so too," he rejoined. "You have done this too many times, and it has now become a habit. And habit, as you know, is second nature. So it is, so it is," I said in an embarrassed manner. The passengers also help one another about the best way to a destination, because not infrequently the conductor has no clear idea of the topography of Delhi, and they often give contradictory directions, each maintaining that his is the right one. So far as newspaper reading is concerned, the fellow passengers never snatch away anybody's paper, but they take the pages he is not reading in the most polite manner and distribute them among themselves. These are, however, scrupulously returned. Books are often tugged at. One day, a fellow passenger pulled hard at an edition of the Gita I was holding in my hand. And when I did not let go but objected, he said angrily, "You have got a holy book in your hand and you are behaving like this? I don't want your book." He did make a pariah of me. I had the habit of leaving my seat and waiting at the door of the bus so as to be able to get down as soon as it comes to the stop. Instead of keeping it waiting as most of us do. But when the others see me doing this, they cry out in anxiety, "Please have patience." Some even catch hold of my coattails or grip the arm to prevent me from moving. They also help in more exceptional circumstances. One day, I found that I had only 1 bad rupee with me and the conductor would not take it. In such a situation, it is the custom with us to appeal to the general will of the passengers. As I did not do that, a fellow passenger snatched a coin from my hand, looked at it, and said, "It is bad, but don't worry. I'm going to exchange it for a good one." And he took out a 1 rupee note, gave it to me, and put my bad rupee in his pocket. I was so amazed that I could not prevent him. All sorts of other incidents happen which make the bus in Delhi a microcosm of national life. On one occasion, I saw a hysterical young woman trying to commit suicide by jumping out of a window and being pulled back by her husband. There are quarrels, sometimes verbal, sometimes involving the limbs, not only between a passenger and another passenger, or a passenger and the conductor, but also between the conductor and the driver. One day, the two quarreled and came to blows, and then the driver got down in the huff and went off into Edward Park to lie down on the grass. He did not come back until the whole body of passengers had shouted their entreaties to him for some time. What takes place at the stops is even more out of the ordinary in the Western standards, and I shall relate only one of my experiences. It should be remembered that in the capital of India, the buses on certain roads come at intervals, if 20 minutes or more, and that they are also irregular. I was waiting for my bus on one of these routes, and there came along an elderly gentleman with his family. He asked me if he could go to Red Fort from that stop, and when I said that he could, he thanked me profusely and gave the information that he was a visitor to the town. He pointed to a young girl in the party and said, "That is my daughter. She's in her BA class, and I am dunking now of her marriage." Then he introduced his son to me too. After that, he left town to say that they were coming from the house of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, where they had his darshan, and that is to say, were present at his ceremonial appearance before visitors. Continuing this communicative cue, he informed me that the last time he had come to Delhi was 2 years ago, and that he added with a shy smile was over a lawsuit with his father. I could hardly remain indifferent to the raising of such a topic. Seeing that I was interested, he went to the trouble of explaining the whole affair. Of course, he spoke throughout in English, and I shall give his exact words so far as I can remember them. "You see," he began, "my mother died some years ago, and my father, who was old at the time, took a concubine. My brothers and I did not mind this at all, but after some time, he brought this lady into the house, which we could not pay over. So my brothers and I went up to him and said, Reverend Father, you cannot do that. You may, of course, associate with the lady, but you cannot bring her into our ancestral house where we, your sons, you are with our children. Upon this, my father got very angry and shouted, "Nothing doing. I shall disinherit the whole lot of you." We replied that he could not do that either. So it went to the courts, but the judge advised me to settle the matter out of court. At this point, the bus came into view and I prepared to move. The gentleman surprised me, however, by asking for my name and address. Upon my inquiring the reason, he replied that he wanted to send me some mangoes from his own orchard and that they were very good. I replied, "Thank you very much, but there is really no occasion for it." "No, sir," he rejoined with great warmth of feeling. "It is no trouble whatever. You have given me the pleasure of your company and conversation, and I want to show my gratitude for it. But the bus had come along and I had to jump into it without being able to bring the matter to a more graceful conclusion. It is this common humane, this large-hearted wiping out of the distinction between public and private affairs, this craving for sympathy in widest commonly spread that make us recoil from the dreariness of the public behavior of the English people." Thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am. Thanks to everybody for listening. Thank you, Preeti ma'am, for just suggesting the text and giving me the opportunity to read in front of Uma ma'am and all others here.
That was really lovely. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Over to Vinitha.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Sangeetha. That was a wonderful rendition. I really got into the mood of the piece that you were reading. Yes, so over to my presentation. Thank you, Chairperson Dr. Uma. I would like to thank our Principal, Dr. Uma Maheshwari, and our HOD, Dr. Maria Preeti Srinivasan, for giving me an opportunity to present today. The song Enjoy Enjaami made a mark within a few days of its launch on 7th March 2021. It in fact created a furore in the world of music with its foot-tapping music, regional flavor, showcasing indigenous musical instruments, and brilliant lyrics conveying a universal message. It instantly became a viral song and garnered approximately 19 million views in just over a week on YouTube. The team comprising of lyricist Arivu, singer Dee, and composer Santosh Narayanan have undoubtedly heralded in a new era in the realm of popular music. Arivu's personal experiences have shaped the attitude and mood of this song. Arivu's grandmother, Valliyamma, shared her experiences with him, and this exerted a profound influence in the way Arivu perceived the world. She belonged to one of the oppressed communities in Tamil Nadu who were forcibly sent to Sri Lanka to work in the tea plantations during the colonial rule. These people worked in the plantations as indentured laborers. Having been separated from their roots and native lands, these migrant workers had to suffer a lot of ordeals. The landless laborers toiled away day and night in the foreign lands. They tried to forget the poignancy of the situation by remembering their past and sharing stories with their children. Probably they sang and worked to forget the tedium of their work. The Sirimava Shastri Pact, signed in 1964 between the Indian and Sri Lankan government, allowed repatriation of approximately 5.25 lakh persons of Indian origin. The repatriated people were resettled in different parts of Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Kerala, and Andhra Pradesh. They were given employment by the government to work in tea, coffee, and rubber plantations, and also in the spinning mills. But the mills were shut down, and eventually they began working as migrant laborers. Arivu's grandmother is one such survivor, and the quintessence of her struggles has been subtly expressed by Arivu in this song. The tech platform Maja, an initiative by the internationally acclaimed musician A.R. Rahman, has been promoting the original and creative works of independent artists. This platform launched the song Enjaami, and this enabled the song to reach a wider audience. The song is a fusion of Tamil rap and Opari, which is a lament song. Aravu has brilliantly blended that genre in the song, thus giving it a unique freshness. The opening scene of the song focuses on lush green plants, and a hand grabs the soil to the accompaniment of the music emanating from the parai. Simultaneously, one can hear the ululation and see the soil vibrating to the tunes of the parai. The parai, generally considered as the musical instrument of the oppressed people, has been projected in this song as an heirloom of their community and as an instrument that has empowered them. This powerful visual quickly enables the viewer to connect with the theme of the song. The song speaks about the wisdom of the people who for generations had led a life closely connected with the soil, but unfortunately have no land of their own. The entire song is predominantly shown in hues of brown and green in order to reiterate the theme of land and ecosystem. Contrary to other music albums, this song features real villagers who are weaving baskets and a lot of elderly men, women, and children. The words enjoy and Enjaami is an interesting collocation. Enjaami is a term used by landless laborers while addressing their landowners. It is a term which confirms the servile position of the workers and symbolic of the power hierarchy in the society. It is also a term used by mothers as an endearment to call their children. Aravu has cleverly employed the word Enjaami in the song to throw light on the struggles faced by his ancestors. The appropriation of the word Enjaami has raised considerable interest worldwide. In the rap portion of the song, Aravu has used the Opari style and sings about his grandmother with a surukupai full of betel leaves and nuts, and subtly hints at the challenges she had faced. The message from the grandmother is to take care of the earth as a sacred land bequeathed by our ancestors. Other living things too have been existing in tandem in the ecosystem. The second rap portion focuses on the dilemma faced by the landless laborers. They have sweated away and nourished gardens and groves, but sadly cannot enjoy the fruits of their labor as they sent away because they are considered to be expendable. The refrain of the song is a call for all humans, irrespective of class, creed, gender, and race, to join hands together and live harmoniously with nature. There is also the subtle plea for social justice, as the landless laborers have been victimized and ostracized for no fault of theirs. Though a lot of injustice has been meted out to the marginalized people, they have not lost the zing for life. The elderly people, as shown in the video of the song, have beautiful smiles, indicating their fighting spirit and refusal to bow down to incessant challenges in life. The will to look at life as a constant flux is indicative of the wisdom of these communities. The communities which once faced marginalization is looking at its history of struggles as a legacy of resilience and not as a humiliation. They are proud to display their mastery of Parai and the Opari song. As Ranajit Guha states that the small voice of history is the story of the common people in history, which in fact is the biggest voice of history. The grandmother Valyamai's voice is the small voice of history, which has been amplified by her grandson Aravu through this viral song. The song is a celebration of exploring roots and honoring traditional practices. The last scene of the song shows the grandmother Valyama as the sanosha of all eyes, seated on a wicker sofa, along with a lot of elderly people. She is in fact validating the pride of the youngsters in the strength gained from the older generation. So I'll play the song for you now. Hope you will enjoy its beautiful music, stunning visuals, and brilliant lyrics. Just a moment. Thank you, ma'am. That was my presentation.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Vinitha. That was beautiful. I did watch it before, but it was more fun watching it after you went through the whole thing. Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for both the presentations. I think it leads us so beautifully into the topic of the day, what the two presenters are going to present. So I'll just briefly maybe lead on to that, say 2-3 minutes or so. I hope we have the time, Preeti, for that.
Yes, we do. We have the time.
Okay,
Just
I
that.
understand. All right. I mean, when Sangeetha spoke about Nirad Chaudhuri's text, right, and I was very interested. I was even more interested because it was about Delhi, because Delhi is where I am from. I was born and brought up in Delhi. So in a way, I lived in displacement always. Because in Delhi, to be a madrasan, I don't know if how many are familiar with the term madrasan. At that time, when I was born, Chennai was Madras, and anyone who belonged to Madras was called madrasan. And the term madrasan was used in a very derogatory way. If you were called a madrasan, people are making fun of you, and they would constantly speak about the South Indian complexion. They'll speak about the South Indian way of speaking Hindi and so on. And I think in my generation, because we were born and brought up then, we were still okay. But for my parents, it was even more difficult. And they would have some small confusion between how to say 1.5 and 2.5, because Hindi is a bit confusing like that. So what immediately resonated with me was, how does one feel one is in a displaced state? Yeah. And then more interestingly, we would go back to Chennai for holiday. And when we would go back there, my cousins will say, oh, you're so Delhi. You're so Delhi. Always speak in Hindi to us. Why can't you speak in Tamil? Because we spoke Tamil, but it was so difficult to speak entirely in Tamil because we were so used to speaking in Hindi. So in Chennai as well, we were not accepted because, no, I mean, you don't belong here. So there was this whole idea of what makes one belong. And the interesting part here is what makes one belong is your ability to live in a public space in the way the people live. And one such thing was like what Sangeetha spoke about. If there's a person sitting next to you, do you converse with him, right? So in Delhi, you spoke so much about the bus, right? And in Delhi, what used to happen, if you want to buy a ticket and you get in from the front of the bus, there are at least 500 people in a bus which can take only 40. And then you're trying to buy your ticket from the front and the conductor sits there, he doesn't move. Yeah. So we'll just pass that. I don't know how many coins it was. It is just some amount of, we had to just pass some paise behind. The money would go intact and the ticket would come to us. And sometimes the ticket won't come, but the conductor knows we bought the ticket already. And then we are free to get down wherever we have to. So that kind of community, which I saw in Delhi, it really resonated with me. And then when I moved to Singapore, it was different. It was totally different. Yeah, people, like you can sit next to a person, but he or she may not even speak to you or may not even look at you. What's worse, they may get up and go sit somewhere else for whatever reason. Yeah. So constantly the idea of, I always thought that what makes you belong is how you behave in public spaces. What you do inside your house probably doesn't matter so much. So I think the extract that you read brought up so clearly, when you enter into a conversation, what makes a conversation between people from same culture or different culture? What really makes people belong? So I thought that was beautifully done. Sangeetha, in the way you presented, it was so animated, lovely. And when I came to Vinitha's song and the way she presented us with the history of it, one thing that really stood out was appropriation is empowering, right? Appropriation is empowering. And I think the song brought it out beautifully, not only through the words, the appropriation of Enjaami that you highlighted, but also through expression, the head held high at all times. The outfits are so classy and so upper class, right? And the rap, the combination of rap and the opari and the pare, it was so amazingly. The fusion brings up the very conscious effort at appropriation. So it just brought to my mind one very significant point about post-colonial reality and what really led to the nationalist struggle that we all speak about. Remember earlier on in Tempest, Caliban says, you taught me language and I learned to curse you in it. And later on in the colonial, in the resistance to colonialism, the way the Indian elite looked at the struggle was to go there, learn their ways, and answer them back in it. So again, appropriation was a very, very important part of nationalist struggle. So that's something that stood out so clearly from what Vinitha spoke about. There were so many other things that came to my mind, like the idea about wisdom of the people. Does that make one belong? What is identity really? Now, if we say appropriation is empowering, this leads us directly to the discussion of diaspora that the two papers are going to be engaging with. I think one paper is on general idea of diaspora. The other is more oriented towards role of women, gender identity within diaspora. When we look at appropriation as empowering, it becomes a more complicated concept in the diaspora. Because when you appropriate, you also give up something. You are losing yourself in becoming something else. And that's the key to the diasporic hybridity, as it were. And you mentioned Ranajit Guha, Vinitha, and I think that was great because Ranajit Guha does engage in a very big way with the voice of the marginalized, right? But in the diaspora, it's a very ironic situation that the minority is not marginalized, but the minority doesn't have a voice. Do you know what I mean? So when you live in the diaspora, what becomes a very important force to contend with is your identity formed by appropriation? Because appropriation not only leads to a gain, but it leads to a loss. Now, there are many diasporic writers who speak about, people can live in multiple roots. People can live with different consciousness. It is not difficult to do so, but it's very difficult to do so. Because when you look at people trying to fit in to one kind of culture, they will definitely transform their own culture. They don't fit in fully into the new culture. For instance, I know a family that is settled in the US, right? They don't celebrate Deepavali. They celebrate Thanksgiving. And Deepavali and Thanksgiving are totally different contexts. Right? I think it comes around the same time, if I'm not wrong, but they're totally different contexts. But their house is full of artifacts from India. So there seems to be some kind of a confusion, an ambivalence of identity. There is a very strong desire to belong, but it's not always possible to belong by just assuming and absorbing both cultures into oneself. So the basic focus of diaspora has always been on, are there many spaces? Is it possible to live with multiple roots? When you live as a diasporic, are you living in exile? Right? That's the original idea. And I'm sure the speakers are going to touch upon that, so I won't go too much into it. But I think just in leading on to the topic of diaspora, we can look at some very important points about, does displacement allow you to live with a strong sense of identity? And I'm sure one of the speakers is going to touch on it. And what becomes worse is for women. Because for women, it is not just the patriarchal control in the homeland, but when they move away from homeland, they're challenged by people looking at them in a very strange way. If you're very conservative, they say, what? You've come out of your country, do you still want to follow all of that? Many people follow it because they're quite scared to leave it, because if they leave it, then they are losing a very important part of themselves. I'm just going to finish up with this one sentence I heard from a guru, which has stayed with me always. Guru Omkarananda, Swami Omkarananda, many of you may have heard of him. He recently passed on. He was in Singapore, and he said, I noticed that in Singapore, many of you follow religion even more consciously. Are you guilty that you've left your land? So this idea of guilt, idea of wanting to belong, idea of having a proper, stable identity is at the root of diaspora. I won't take up your time too much now. I think that kind of takes us on to the two presenters for the day. So I will go ahead and introduce our speakers. I think we are going in the order of Vasugi and Priya Dharisini. Yeah? So I'll start off with Vasugi's bio note first. So Mrs. P.M. Vasugi, Assistant Professor at Queen Mary's College. She's worked in government college for more than 10 years. She is seen as student-friendly, and she's quite zealous to learn more. She has published papers in national and international journals, and also the journal in-house, QMC. Her area of interest is in Indian writing and poetry of all ages. So today, Mrs. Vasugi will be presenting on Indian diaspora and its concepts. The topic carries information on the root word of diaspora and its concepts like nostalgia, ambivalence, assimilation, and so on. Highlighted Indian diasporic writers here and how they write in the backdrop of cultural traits of their land of origin. So that will be Mrs. Vasugi's paper. And I will also introduce Dr. Priya Dharisini at this point in time. So Dr. S. Priya Dharisini has 15 years of teaching experience, and her PhD was on reorientalism and representation of Indian women. Gender and identity politics in select contemporary novels by home and diasporic Indian women writers. She has also presented in national and international conferences. She's interested in diasporic Indian women writers and how these writers present their nostalgic thoughts and emotions through their writing. So our title today is going to be Diasporic Women Writers. Yeah. So over to the two presenters for the day.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the brief introduction. First of all, I would like to thank our HOD, ma'am, Dr. Maria Preeti Srinivasan, for giving me this opportunity to throw light on what is diaspora and also present my paper before Uma Jayaraman, ma'am. And after listening to Uma Jayaraman, ma'am, I was little nostalgic about my own childhood days. Because I too have come from displaced from various states since my father was in army. So I got an opportunity to visit various states like Andhra, then Punjab, and then I did my higher education in Delhi, my +1. And the same attitude of what you have said, like how North Indians or Delhi people used to call Madrasi, they used to call as Madrasi. And even if I say, no, I'm from North India, my color reveals me that, no, she is a Madrasi only. So that's how my identity is. So I cannot, change my identity. That's my, Madrasi is my real identity. So moving on to my presentation, I would like to share a screen, ma'am. I'd like to share screen. So this is a topic on all about Indian diaspora. I'll give you a brief introduction initially with what diaspora is. The word diaspora derives from the Greek word dia, which means through or over, and sperio means dispersal or to sow. The word diaspora has a specific historical association with the dispersion of the Jewish people and also refers to displaced communities of people who have been dislocated from the native homeland through the movements of migration, immigration, or exile. The two kinds of diaspora are forced and voluntary diaspora. Forced diaspora often arises from traumatic events such as wars, imperialistic conquest, or enslavement, or from natural disasters like famine or extended drought. As a result, the forced diasporas share the feelings of persecution, loss, and desire to return to their homeland. In contrast, a voluntary diaspora is a community of people who have left their homelands in search of economic opportunity. Unlike forced diaspora, voluntary diasporas maintain close cultural and spiritual links to their countries of origin, and their wish to return to the land of origin is quite less. The types of diaspora, there are different types of diaspora like Jewish diaspora, Chinese diaspora, African diaspora, and Mexican diaspora, and so on. I try to touch upon a little about history of Indian diaspora. The expansion of British imperial control in India was from 16th to 18th century. India was the creation from 1830s of a system of indenture labor to provide cheap workforce in the colonial plantation. In the places like Caribbean, the Indian Ocean, South and Southeast Asia, Africa, and the Pacific. In South and Southeast Asia, variant forms of indentures are called as Kangani and Maestri, who were employed to control the workers. The Kangani system began in the coffee and tea plantation of Ceylon before it introduced into Malaya in 1890. In the last 3 decades of 20th century, the characters of Indian migration completely changed and a new diaspora began to emerge. The flexible US policies for skilled migrants gave way to Indian migration to professionals like scientists, engineers, academicians, doctors, managers, and people with entrepreneurial flair. The convict workforce was vital to the development of early colonial infrastructure. Convicts were used in clearing jungles, constructing roads, bridges, and buildings. Some remarkable structures built by convicts still stand memorable, such as St. Andrew's Cathedral and Istana, which is the office and residence of President of Singapore. And it was these monuments, these great buildings was completed in 1862 and 69 in Singapore. Concepts of diaspora. Diaspora is often defined in 2 phases, old and new diaspora. In South Asian context, the old diaspora denotes the time during the colonial period from 1830 to 1930, when there was British rule, and it is also called colonial phase. The defining characteristics of old diaspora is that its members were either taken forcefully or forcibly shifted. Therefore, their chances of going back home were slim. According to Spivak, the old diaspora was a result of war, religious oppression, slavery, and trade. But the new diaspora incorporates India into its bordered, deterritorialized experience within Western nation states. The simplistic binaries of here and there, dislocation and yearning of an imagined homeland, and its fake recreation in another land gives way to realities of here and now. Robin Cohen identifies some common features of diaspora, such as dispersal from an original homeland, often dramatically the expansion from a homeland in search of work, in pursuit of trade, or to further colonial ambition. Like Saffron, Cohen also identifies the formation of a collective memory and myth about the homeland, including its location, history, and achievement, and an idealization of putative ancestral home and a collective commitment to its maintenance. Diasporic literature deals with the spatial movement between homeland and land of settlement, between the familiar and the strange, the old and the new. Comparison between the 2 spaces, that is homeland and adopted land, are frequent in the writings of immigrant writers.
Are you sharing the PPT?
Hello? Yes, ma'am?
Are you sharing PPT?
Yes, ma'am?
It's not visible.
It's not visible?
No.
Okay, ma'am, 1 second. We are Shall I do it again, ma'am?
No, not necessary.
Not necessary. Okay, then
You can just read.
Read it. Okay.
Yeah, no problem. No need of the PPT.
1 second. Will you give me 1 second,
Yes,
ma'am?
you can. But we have followed so far.
Okay.
Yeah, carry on, Vasu, if you're if you're ready. Yeah.
Yeah. Not able to. I'm not able to, ma'am. Okay, I'll continue, ma'am. Robin Cohen identifies
Actually, I think your reading is quite good and we are able to follow. So if you are not sharing any video or anything, we can just go on, yeah?
Okay, ma'am. Okay. Sorry for the inconvenience.
No worries.
Diasporic literature deals with the spatial movement between homeland and the land of settlement, between the familiar and the strange, the old and the new. Comparison between the two spaces, that is homeland and adopted land, are frequent in the writing of immigrant writers. Diaspora exists because it remembers the homeland, and without the memory, the migrants and settlers would be people in a new setting into which they merge, bringing nothing to the new home, accepting the ways and forms and attitudes that already exist in the new country and society. The diasporic subjects in the new land recreates in their socio-economics, political and cultural institutions a version of India and maintain perceptions of the homelands they remember. Diaspora, transnationalism, and globalization are concepts that have gained considerable currency since the early decades of 20th century. Cinema is the most popular of India's daily art form, and Hindi cinema has gained the national audience within India and an increasing audience worldwide. The export of popular Hindi films, its music, and star-dusted shows are popular overseas to migrating Indians. The films have been used as entertainment and as a way of maintaining cultural and social links with the homeland. Writers of Indian diaspora. The old diaspora has produced many writers of note, but the more powerful or influential is V.S. Naipaul, who is grandson of indenture laborers. Naipaul never loses sight of his indenture history. Naipaul writes about his familiar temporariness, the ambivalence of becoming part of the landscape, the failure to find roots. I have mentioned some of the writers here. In the works of Bharti Mukherjee, Hanif Qureshi, and Monica Ali, the old plantation diaspora's break with India is replaced by the idea of comforting homeland accessible to them via the internet and modern technology set against the threatening nation state in which their selves are located. There are members of South Asian East Indian diaspora in Canada who are twice displaced. The writers are Ramabhai Espinet, Shani Muto, Ian Iqbal Rashid, and Yasmin Ladha, Neil Busundat, Cyril Debadin, and M.G. Vasanji. Bisundat tries to capture the trauma of Caribbean Indian migrant. And in the works of Rohinton Mistry, who is the best-known Indo-Canadian writer, the finest, and he is very popular in Canada. In his first major work, Such a Long Journey, which was published in 1991, belongs to the vibrant field of diasporic composition, where the migrant reconstructs in fiction memories of his past, of he or she has left behind. Through his characters, he tries to project that. And Rao Badami, the work Tamarind Mame, the narrative signifies the silence of women both at home and in diaspora. Shauna Singh Balwani's Tale in English Lessons and Other Stories, published in 1996, continue the strong trend in Indian diasporic writing towards representing female voices. Meena Alexander is passionately involved with issues like immigration, ethnicity, culture, and race relations, and focus in her works on what she calls in an essay entitled Is There an Asian American Aesthetics?, which focuses on the pain and violence of dislocation, which is often accompanied by a poetic of loss, as well as emergence of a sensibility enriched by the simultaneity of geography, which involves the possibility of living here in body and elsewhere in mind, and imagination. In Alexander's words, she says back and forth, forth and back, and inhabiting in many different spaces at the same time. Diasporic elements like alienation, rootlessness, displacement, nostalgia, identity crisis, sense of loss, assimilation, these are some of the predominantly used elements, ideas in diasporic work. Diasporic consciousness finds expression in literature as a diasporic literary tradition, and the migrant authors are conscious of their social positioning, which they seek to change through political and cultural means. Migrant authors such as Hanif Qureshi, Rohinton Mistry, Salman Rushdie, and Vikram Seth, Jhumpa Lahiri, M.G. Vasanji are charged with diasporic consciousness, and they attempt to render their problems and prospects through their writing. Writing is one of the modes used by all diasporic writers to keep their memories of the homeland fresh. Migrant writers are like outsiders and raise the question within themselves of, who am I? The initial works of diasporic writers are autobiographical and focus on the issue like nostalgia, rootlessness, dislocation, and displacement. The diasporic writers have a temporal and spatial move. In the temporal move, the writers look backward to the past, and the spatial, they look forward to the future. It produces nostalgia, themes of survival, and cultural assimilation. Every conception of diaspora features the idea of return to a homeland in some form. The return would be either physical return or metaphorical return. Diasporic literature deals with the spatial movement between homeland and land of settlement, between the familiar and the strange, the old and the new. Contrast and comparison between the two spaces are frequent in the writing of immigrant writers. To support the above ideas, I would like to discuss a novel, No New Land by M.G. Vasanji. The novel is based in Toronto and traces the life of Shamshis from Tanzania, who are struggling to settle into a new environment. Vasanji focuses on the tribulation faced by protagonist Noordin Lalani, who was one of the forcibly ejected from Tanzania due to the Africanization programs of decolonization phase in the post-independence era in Africa that affected many Indians. For Noordin and his family, Canada does not give the impression of the new land because his dream of carving out a new life is dashed by the repeated instances of racism and violence directed against him and other members of the Asian African immigrant community. In the end, Noordin's dreams of returning remain just like that as he settles for a surrogate home in Canada. Thank you so much for the opportunity, ma'am. Sorry, I couldn't share the screen.
No worries. I think that was a great read. We could follow it. Yeah, thanks for that.
Thank you.
Should we move on? to Priya Dharisini, and then
Yes,
we'll
ma'am.
take both papers together later. Yeah.
Vasugi ma'am, can you stop sharing the screen? Just click on stop sharing. Yeah. Good evening. Have a paper on diasporic women writers. As nostalgia is one of the important aspects of diaspora, I would also like to start with the same. I got introduced to diasporic writing in the year 2005 when I'm a student at University of Madras. I fondly even today remember the works which I read. Rohinton Mistri's swimming lessons, the short stories from it, and Women Warrior from Maxim Kingston, and Northern M.G. Vasanji's No New Land, and the works like Dean Alexander's Fault Lines, which I read with the utmost interest. From that day to till today, I'm a great fan of diasporic literature, especially the writers who write about their experience, the conflicts which they face, the sufferings which they undergo in a foreign land, especially reading about what is the difference between mosaic culture and what is melting pot, and what is the difference between the two, and especially even that had made me much more interested in this type of writings than the others. Especially I read the works of Anita Desai's Zigzag Way, and Jhumpa Lahiri's work, Kiran Desai's, all these writers are my favorite one. Even that has led me to do my PhD, which is a comparative study between Indian women writers, so that is the home writers, and the diasporic writers. I have compared Bharti Mukherjee's works and Chitra Banerjee, Diva Kurani's, and the Salita Mandana's Tiger Hills with other Indian writers, and where I have applied re-Orientalism, and I've tried to show that how they are trying to click on to the Indian culture. And today in this particular presentation, I'm going to talk about Indian women writers and how they try to project the life of women in a foreign land. Yes, diasporic Indian women writers. As we can see in this picture, how this diaspora, the community has spread throughout the world. As ma'am has already introduced, I'm not going to go much into this topic, that is diaspora, which refers to the community of people who are displaced from different parts of the world from their birth for socio-economic or political reasons. And as it is a forced or a voluntary one, diasporic literature, when we look into it, it involves an idea of a homeland, a place from where the displacement occurs. The narratives of harsh journeys undertaken, an account of economic, social, or political compulsions. Diaspora, which has become a contemporary social trend, it is also a literary genre. The experience of expatriation not only gradually, it disconnects the individual from its roots, it simultaneously polarizes his existence, which straddles nationality and exile. Especially, oh my God. Especially when we look at the role of female writers, especially the diasporic women writers, the novels which they have produced, which have enriched with experiences and especially mentalities of Indian diaspora. Especially they portray the
life of women. And they try to show their loneliness, the sadness, the alienation, which is connected with migration. They throw light upon the sufferings of such women through their writing. First and the foremost, I would like to talk about Anita Desai, who's a very famous Indian diasporic writer. I would also like to talk about her novel, Bye Bye Blackbird. In this particular work, she portrays an immigrant, Sarah, who searches for her identity in a new land. That is where she is displaced. Especially in this particular work, she deals with the problem, especially the immigrant who faces the difficult situations and alienation, the love-hate relationship, and how she tries to adjust with the new land, and what are the problems she faces, and how she tries to just exist. The theory of existentialism comes in. You can even say that it's a story of human relationship, and as well as it also portrays the cultural differences and way she has to accept and has to live with. Where the novel tries to talk about the viewpoint of young immigrants, especially in the aspect of discrimination, how the East-West cultural dichotomies and disappointments and isolation faced by immigrants in New Land. And when I look at the work of Bharati Mukherjee's Difficult Daughters, the work is set in America and as well as in India, where the beginning of the novel, we are introduced to the work Tree Bride, where a young child bride, where her groom bit by a venomous snake and he dies, and she was forced to marry a tree, and she was wedded to a tree, and how she has to live a life in her isolation, where the heroine of the story, the protagonist, Tara, who was named after her, who marries a young businessman in US and settles there. And she faces many difficult situations in the new land, and how she tries to cling on to her culture. Though she tries to be a new woman, she cannot just detach herself from the attachment towards her homeland. And she, even after what can we say? We can say that after a long or a harsh condition she faces, and she decides to divorce her husband and try to lead a single life, and where her son Andy, who has become a gay, and how she tries to accept it as she is living in US, and she wants to lead her own life, and then she tries to think of the Tree Bride, and where she thinks where Tara is married to a tree, and she has to lead her life in such a manner. Why can't I adjust with my husband? And at last, in the end, she reconciles with him in the end. So it is a story where a nice hybrid story which combines with the suspense, a good thriller story throughout, and where the writer Bharati Mukherjee tries to show the difference between the life of women, especially when they were in India, how they were living, and what were the conditions and how it were different. And she compares the life of Tara with her sisters, the other two sisters, and it was beautifully narrated, especially through the life of the protagonist Tara, how the author tries to narrate the experience of Indian women in US. And next, I would like to throw light upon Chitra Banerjee Divakarani, especially a writer who with her work Mistress of Spices. Even that, I think, it has come as a movie, and it was acted by Aishwarya Rai, and it is one of the famous Indian American movie. It portrays about a Indian girl who works in a spice shop in Auckland, and how she tries to help other immigrants to resolve their problems with the magic of her spices. Especially when we look at this character Thilo, when she was in India, and how she was treated, and how she was abducted by pirates, and then how she landed with her first mother, who teaches her all this magical. The novel portrays the aspects of magical realism, how she lands in US, and how what were the promise that she has taken, how she sticks on to that until she meets a Native American Raven, and how she falls in love with him, and the promise that she has given is that she will never leave the spice store or never engages herself with relationship with another man, and where when she goes out with Raven, and what are the problems she faces, and then how in the end she tries to rebuild the spice store. Beautifully, the story narrates about the problem of women, especially when she tries to talk about an Indian nurse and a young girl who wants to marry an Chicano, and what are the problems that they face. So it's all beautifully narrated, and especially about a taxi driver, and how he was attacked by racists. It was beautifully narrated by Chitra Banerjee Divakurani in her work, The Mistress of Spices. And then to Nina Alexander, Fault Lines. It is a nostalgia, it's like a memoria, and where she has narrated, and she has explained, or she narrates about her childhood experience as a daughter, as a woman, and as a wife, and also as a mother. In this particular work, she talks about the cultural differences and her identity crisis, and how she is even confused with what sort of clothes she should wear. She talks about how she migrated from Sudan and then to America, and what were the problems that she faced in Sudan and as well as in America, and how does she try to recope with herself. So Nina Alexander has explained the problem, especially with women, and about the racial intolerance and the life of an immigrant in a very intimate manner through her work, Fault Lines. And then Jhumpa Lahiri, who is a second generation Indian American, who was born in London, and where she tries to portray in her work Namesake, which is considered one of the best fiction written about immigrant life. In this particular novel, she tries to talk about the aspects like generation gap, especially about the first and the second generation immigrants through Ashok and Ashima and their children Gogul and Sonia. Especially when you look at the life of Ashok and Ashima, they'll be so eager to go to India, they'll be so happy, they'll be attached to the Indian culture and even the food. So everything for them, that Indian is something great. But whereas for Gogul and Sonia, it is always, their mother will force them to do something. And where Ashima and Ashok would be waiting for their holidays to go back to India, where Gogul and Sonia doesn't want, almost, they think it is something like the forced one. And when Gogul wants to marry this girl, Mashumi, and where I remember a line from Namesake. She says, I didn't want to marry, I wanted to marry you just because you're not a doctor or you're not an engineer. So she says this. So almost it talks about the life of the first generation, the difference between the first and the second generation immigrants. Even in her work, Unaccustomed Earth, which is a collection of short stories, she has beautifully explained the problems that the immigrant faces, especially with the conflict of East and West belief, the cultural displacement, how that affects them, nostalgia and the loss of identity, especially when they try to find out who they are and what is their position in this particular country. They think that they were somebody who's great and they have gone to US and they have settled there. When they go and settle there, they find the problems. They are not treated as equal, as ma'am has said, how she is looked differently in Delhi as a Madrasi, which is looked as or a derogative one, and where I have read somewhere the Indians are referred as coconuts, as they say that the whites are like pulp, and whereas the Indians are called as coconuts because of their brown skin, and they were mocked at, and especially with their dressing, and though they try to cope up with the new land, with the new country, and they find so many problems, especially this alienation, despair, where they miss their family, and especially when you look at a women who lived in India for quite nearly 20 to 25 years maybe in a joint family or in with their mother, father, sister, to share her feelings, where she has to live all alone, and when she does not have anybody to understand her thoughts and feelings. All these were beautifully portrayed by these women writers, and they try to almost make the readers feel how the life were in that particular country. So to conclude, I would like to say diasporic women writers from Kamala Markandeya, or when I look at Anita Desai or Bharti Mukherjee or Chitra Banerjee, Divakarani, Meena Alexander, Jhumpa Lahiri or Kiran Desai, they have portrayed the immigrant life, the cultural differences from their homeland to the land which they have migrated, the problems of identity crisis, the racial intolerance they face, and about the international affairs, especially the issues which is dealing with arranged marriages, and they have portrayed from the perspective of women. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that. I think both were very descriptive and quite elaborate presentations. Hope everyone enjoyed it. So before I open it to the House, maybe just a couple of things that come to my mind with regard to both presentations. I will just share, and then we will open for discussion to the House. I think Vasugi's paper the papers gelled very well, because Vasugi's paper set the ground for the background, the different kinds of diasporas, old and new, and forced and voluntary, and what really made a particular diaspora forced or even voluntary, and what were the basic differences. A very important point I think Vasugi brought up was memory of the homeland. If there was no memory, then there would be no diaspora. So that's a very, very important point. Maybe we can engage with it a bit more if anyone wants to speak about it. And the other thing that I thought was very well done was in the diaspora, there is a coming together of both the familiar and the strange. The familiar and the strange. And I think that's a great point, because there are several readings on how can you deal with the strange in the land of diaspora. Priya mentioned Divakarani. Divakarani's Queen of Dreams speaks about this kind of situation. The strange land, how does the protagonist cope with that situation? So I'm quite keen to know a bit more about how do we really understand familiar and strange. Anybody in the audience can share about it, or if you want to speak about it, I think that would be great. Then there is this other question of perception of homeland. I think that's central to diaspora, because homeland changes. When you leave home, it totally changes. When I went back to Delhi after many, many years and went to look for my home where I grew up, Obviously, I didn't find it in the same way, and I was in tears. And then I realized you can never go back to your homeland and see it as it is. It will definitely be different. And what came to my mind when you were presenting this, Vasu, was what Rashti said about it. That when you're trying to recreate your homeland, you're actually recreating through a broken mirror. So the fragments of this mirror can never be, some of them may be lost, and you can never put them back in the same way. But the main point here is when you rearrange, it'll be your perception of the mirror. And metaphorically then, when you rearrange your homeland experiences, it is your perception. So I think that point was beautifully brought out by Vasugi, the perception of homeland. Then, of course, Vasugi referred to several writers, amongst which I thought one thing that really stood out was what happens when a diasporic is twice displaced. That was a great point, and it's very common in Parsi diaspora. Mistry writes about it, Basanji writes about it. So you're not only displaced in your own homeland, being the Parsi minority, and probably even caught in the Hindutva-dominated Bombay that Mistry writes about. And when you are in Canada, you are living a double displaced kind of life. So how does that affect your identity in a different way? When you are not the typical privileged diasporic, what happens to you? So that may be an interesting point of discussion as well. And I think there was some overlaps between the two presentations when we came to the women writers. And one particular question that came to my mind was Priya Dharisini's presentation, which brought up when you live in the melting pot, do you suffer? Does melting into the cultures of a land, does it displace you and make you suffer? Or, like Vasugi pointed out, is it possible to look back and forth and live with power? So you're looking back at your own homeland, you're looking forth to the new land, and you're trying to bring the cultures together and you create a space for yourself. So is this a space which makes you live happily? So that's a question that just came to my mind, and probably we can bring it up in the discussion. And I think Vasugi said this in connection with No New Land. Then I think Priya Dharisini's paper again brought up the economic, political, and social impact of migrating, border crossing. And I love the term that you used, re-Orientalism. That's a very interesting word, because Orientalism is a well-known term wherein we are already looking at a writer speaking of writing back to the center in a way. Because even while Said speaks about Orientalism, he's challenging the idea of Orientalism. So when you speak of the term re-Orientalism, so I'm just wondering if you're looking at writing back to the center from a marginalized point of view. So maybe we can speak more about it just in case. One very interesting thing that again came up in Priya Dharisini's paper was when women writers write, what are the issues that they bring about? So there are the larger issues of fitting in, belonging, and so on. But what more can we say when we speak of women writers? So do we see them performing conservative female identity as seen in India, as they experience in India, or are they breaking away from it? For instance, you mentioned Jhumpa Lahiri. Jhumpa Lahiri's namesake is a great idea, a great description. But I was thinking of a short story at the same time. Jhumpa Lahiri's Mrs. Sen, wherein Mrs. Sen tries to fit into this new land. She tries to drive a car, she tries to babysit, and she fails miserably at both. Why? What happens? What makes, again, Tilo fit in? What are the sacrifices that Tilo has to make in Divakarani's work that help her to create an identity for herself? So for women, there is something more at stake because like, if you remember, Dennis Candioti says women are boundary markers. They are given the responsibility of keeping tradition intact in the Indian consciousness. So is the woman diasporic ever able to leave the role of being the boundary marker behind her and create a new life for herself. So these are some questions that came up, and I just thought I would mention them here. But I mean, you don't have to answer them now, or you don't have to take them now, but we can open up for discussion to the House.
Yes.
I don't see everyone on my screen, so I am not going to be able to see who is raising their hand. So you just have to speak up. Yeah. Srilata, do you have a question there? I mean, your screen just went on, so I thought you probably had a question.
Ma'am, you have to switch on the mic.
Yeah. Can't hear you, Srilata.
Oh, yeah, right. Some observations on both the papers. Of course, I finished talking about the others. The other two presentations, I think, as you said, the seeing the infinite silence. I mean, eternal silence of the infinite crowd. When we first read it, we had it as a text in our thing. It was taken away from the Madras University syllabus just for that one word, paraya. I remember that text, which was removed from the Madras University syllabus just because of that one word, paraya, which suddenly they found offensive after so many years. Even I did it as in my general English, I think, in 77. 77 when I did PU, something like that. So that was, I think I've enjoyed teaching that piece also later. And for the first time, it gave me a picture of what it is. That is, there are culture. Of course, foreign lands are foreign lands, but once you go there, what you experience is so very different. Now we are reconsidering. Many of my friends are there, living there. I've seen so many people. Some of them have changed their names. From Anandi, she has become Anna somebody, and that is a little too much. I felt she even changed her accent when she speaks. She doesn't seem to want to come back, or what do you call this longing for coming back, the longing for the culture of India. All that is not at all there in hers, whereas the others talk with pride. Somebody asked me just recently whether Woodlands drive-in restaurant still exists in Tamil Nadu. I mean, in Chennai, they want to come back and have because I said that's all gone. Some other Woodlands is there, but that's all gone. So some kind of the longing, myth making. In many of those, once you go there and you are out of the community, people of your community, then you will have to create for your children some kind of the familiar ideas of home first before you write or before you tell it to the world. I think you will have to create for your own family, that inside the family they continue to keep it. And to the extent that sometimes as we said, Madam Uma just said that she was that Thanksgiving Day is celebrated more than, yes. Baby shower. The word baby shower is something very new to us, right? Here, everybody's celebrating baby showers here, and I wonder whether that is that part of reorientalism. I think they're bringing back, that American culture into India and then calling it. Today we are, I think, more American in our speeches. Our children are, eating all the Western food and all that junk food that America has. They are happy with that. So whether that is reorientalism, I wanted to ask Priya that.
Yes.
Okay, yes, whether that is reorientalism or getting used to that kind of creating that familiar atmosphere. Because I have seen my friends, some of them are more, they know so much more Tamil in California than they do here. They know dance. They have some of them are so many. They've taken their religion so seriously. They have their, religious, practices. They observe it so much there, and they send back pictures that we feel ashamed, right? Whether we have lost our religion. So that extent is also there. Some of them speaking at Pattimandrams of the Solomon Papaya and all that. Some of my friends, they speak so well. I mean, their husbands and all that. So they've just become naturalized Tamilians in not a bit of change. So, I mean, what has this kind of what do you call diasporic? Once upon a time, only those people who we experienced diaspora in our own country. People from Bengal, when there was some kind overrun by some other people, the younger ones all used to migrate to another place and find their place in maybe Orissa or Bihar. I've read in Mahashweta Devi some of these things, finding their places in other places and then settling down, right? And then they still long for their homes. I'm also in that sense a diaspora, because up to age of 5 I was in Kerala, and now I'm a naturalized maybe Tamilian. But still somewhere in the corner of my mind that Kerala still exists, right? But not, I still go back to the place. Our place is sold. It's not like the kind of childhood memories I have at all today. There, if they're also very westernized, and the entire is run over by Americans and Canadians. I mean, living people. So that's
so maybe
different.
Srilata, maybe Priya can take up that question. I think you have a great question there.
What is that?
Reorientalism.
What is this reorientalism you're speaking about? And Vasugi did a good job in giving us an overview, right? And how does this myth making help? Creating this, I think it was in the Amitav Ghosh's trilogy, the second one, that myth-making business comes there, the indentured laborers and how they settle down to a life of, in a foreign country, but at the same time keeping the culture. So this, I think, Priya would do well to do a little bit of explanation on the reorientalism bit.
Yes. Reorientalism is a concept taught by Lisa Love. And reorientalism just talks about how this diasporic writers who live in the foreign land, who tries to write about the Indian culture, especially as they are displaced from their homeland, how they try to cling on to their culture in the foreign land. Especially the Indian women, when you look at the life of Indian women, especially the current day-to-day life, even in our country, when you look at the works of Anita Nair or Manju Kapoor, they portray the present situation of Indian women more realistically than the diasporic writer, as they are so nostalgic about their homeland and about their culture. They try to even portray the women in the same position as we were in 30 or 40 years or even 50 years back through their writing. We cannot say it is in a negative or in a different manner, but still they say that as the Orient, the other, as this, and after colonization, all this Orientalism, which has all have gone by. But now these writers who tries to project the way that the Indians and their lifestyle as the whites wanted us to be, as they are writing it more in there, especially even when you look at the covers of their novels, they'll put out a sari cover or a bangles on their top, which tries to show that it is more Indianized. And they try to portray the women, especially as the arranged marriages happen, especially even now when we look at the present condition of Indian women, we cannot see so many arranged marriages happening even in our own country, and where we accept whatever the live-in relationship, whatever it is, we have come to the next level. But where those writers try to talk about the arranged marriages, the husband who beats his wife and the submissive daughter-in-laws, where it is very hard to find nowadays. So all this is even portrayed through their characters in their writing. They show that that it's a kind of reorientalism. They try to present the life of Indian women as the whites want to see us. They did not want the life has changed. They just want it as it is, as we have seen before 40 or 50 years. So that is this concept reorientalism is all about. where it is a bit harsh on the diasporic writers. Yes, even when I go and settle in a foreign land, yes, I would always think about my own family and the way of life that we have lived in our country.
Yeah, maybe I can just pitch in a bit here while you were talking about reorientalism. It also kind of links back to what we know as cultural involution. This was a very popular thing even during nationalist struggle, where there was a return to certain traditional practices which all our leaders were fighting against. For instance, they wanted liberation of women. They were fighting against widow burning, sati. They were fighting against a lot of things that were being done wrongly to women. But because they wanted to fight against the colonizer, they brought back a lot of rules about giving women a secondary position, keeping them at home. I think Partha Chatterjee has an entire book on this, Nation and its Fragments. And he explains very clearly why that happens. So you do have this idea of cultural involution. Maybe it can be seen side by side with reorientalism. I mean, just something that came to my mind. But I'm going to pass it on to Vasugi. Vasugi, I think you had a question as well here. The question was on myth making. You have to unmute yourself.
Unmute yourself, ma'am.
As far as myth making is concerned, I just wanted to add on with what Priya Dharisini ma'am has said. In almost all the writings of the diasporic writers, in their writings, they always try to portray the women character as they used to be in India, as they have seen Indian women's. Okay, so as they try to portray the Indian women's just the same as they have seen. So they don't want to make them as a very trendy woman, or if you take the novel No New Land or In Between War of Vikram Lal, if we the character there, the woman character which has been portrayed there, we can see that the writer Vasugi tries to say that they are more traditional. They try to bring in the epic stories like Ramayana, Mahabharata and all, and they do regular pujas and all, and they try to carry it over and they want to bring it down to their children also. But you can find the difference between the mother and the children, the first generation and the second generation, who they just wanted to assimilate to the host land than the land of origin. As far as the new generation is concerned, they try to assimilate to the the culture which is existing in their host land, and they are more convenient to that. So even if the parents tries to bring in the qualities what they have learned and they wanted to get it to their children, that becomes impossible for them. And even the first generation migrants, they feel that they should not leave their culture or tradition which is imbibed, which they have taken it within, and they wanted to travel, and which becomes impossible. So all these things are very minutely being explained by the migrant writers. So this is what I just wanted to add on. And as far as myth is concerned, I feel that all the migrant writers in their writing, they feel that they never wanted to forget what they have experienced, whether they are doubly displaced or they are displaced thrice or triple displacement. So all that is not a matter for them. So what they feel is that what they have learned, they have to carry it over. And the factors towards which they have given importance to, they feel that they should keep it as a treasury. And more than that, what the writers generally feel is history is more very important for them. They wanted to know the history. So once they know the history, they'll know the past of theirs. So how we come to know only because we are reading diasporic literature, we come to know about our like past, like how our ancestors were, how the slave came into being, and how the people displaced to so many countries, and why they become indenture laborers, how people were taken to Africa, Malaysia, Ceylon and all, and how they were made to work a lot, and how they are being exploited. So all these factors, through the writings of the diasporic writers, we come to know about that. And more than that, we also come to know about from the work of Vasanji, we come to know that how the Asians in Africa were treated. So because of this Africanization, how Indians were made to like Idi Amin, General Idi Amin, how he announced that within 90 days they have to excavate the land, and how Asians were like put in danger, and they have to move to different places. So all these are some of the tragedies what they have faced, the Indians have faced, the Asians have faced, and more than that, the past is never past has never left them. Okay, the Asians or the migrants, no, whatever they have learned, they feel that they have to put it writing, and it should be shown to the what do you call the others should know about it. Okay, it is not just it's not necessary that they should keep everything within them. It is only the writing which can help them out to reveal what they have known. So this is one some of the ideas what the migrant writers generally travel with or keep that in mind.
Yeah. So just to pitch in there, I think Vasugi, that was a great reply. Just wanted to add that myth making is also to do with the consciously telling stories. I think Srilata mentioned the second of the trilogy by Amitav Ghosh, where there's a very conscious attempt to come up with a myth. Myth making, also Avatar Gra talks about how it's important to tell stories so that you can recreate your past and you can remember them. A great novel which goes in this direction is Chitra Divakarani's One Amazing Day, when everyone caught in that consulate where they don't know whether they're going to get out of that alive because they've been part of an earthquake. Everyone is sharing stories. And they come up with so many stories and create so many memories that it shows them very clearly their state of displacement or belonging or their identity, their past. So the memories are dug up. So myth making is more clearly in terms of stories that we choose to tell each other. Right at home, it can be very tough. We say, in our time, our kids will get up and go away. So myth making becomes very important in our own, especially in a displaced state. Thank you for that. I just thought I would add on to that. Yeah. Is there anyone else with a question?
Can I just pitch in a bit? Yes.
Sure.
I was thinking of our students, postgraduate students here who might be looking at it from a research angle.
Yeah.
So Vasugi rightly, she kind of anchored the whole thing in speaking about voluntary exile and forced. So in terms of migration to Western countries, you see, like America, Australia, you have over there the policy of multiculturalism. So with immigrants coming in and having to fit in, and the keywords there would be assimilation and integration. So the national policy is there, and that policy has been changing also. So to what extent that government recognizes difference and how they navigate difference. So that's one thing we could look at, policies changing. And the first generation and second generation you mentioned, the struggles of the first generation, and how the second generation, they almost like duck to water. They try to take to the new place and probably deny their roots in the homeland. So whether they go into denial or that any other way of creating or recreating identity, home is a very important place. What the home, the policy at home. So whether the parents perform their pujas and involve the children in the pujas, or whether the parents are more concerned about the children being accepted in school. So I can tell you the story about a family, Tamil Christian family in Australia, even as early as 2007. They were this family from Chennai, Porsavakam, had gone to Australia, Sydney, and then the children were sent to school. So the mother packed upma, upma, rava upma. So, and the other white kids said, "What's that yuck thing you're eating?" So that was the end of upma. From the next day, it was sandwiches. So you have got to get the cultural code right. When you go to school, you take sandwiches. You don't take chapatis. You don't take your chapatis and goat meat curry or whatever you eat at home. You take sandwiches. Okay, so and this thing about the food that you eat in your place of work is an observation I made about migrants. That kind of adapting or assimilating, accepting the dominant culture comes in. So these are the two points I wanted to make. One is about the policy. So, and another thing is about if they're going as indentured labor. So it depends where they're going. If they're going to the Caribbean, if they're going to Africa, and you go to Fiji. So Fiji, they are just Indians in a different place. They speak Hindi, they watch the Hindi movies. There's no integration there. There's no pressure also to integrate because the social groups are so clearly different, and there's no pressure to integrate. And so you can look at these ideas of how indentured labor probably have actually maintained their identity over generations. So many people in Fiji have not been to India, but they are so Indian in their dress, in their speech. So these are some ideas that we can look at.
Thanks for that, Preeti. I think that gave them a lot of food for thought, I'm sure. Okay, so I don't see any more questions here. So if there are no more questions, I guess we'll come to the end of the presentation, and thank you very much for that, all four presenters today. Then can we move over then, Preeti, to the conclusion?
And thank you, Dr. Uma, for having given us a very enlightening session, putting in things in the, right perspective for all of us today.
Yes, thank you, my pleasure, absolutely.
Yes, Srilata, it just makes a whole lot of difference as to who the chairperson is, Srilata has been there on almost all our sessions, and Srilata has retired from service and someone who's mentoring all of us actually in a way.
No,
so
really.
Yes, that's too big a word maybe from her if she looks at it that way, but it's nice to have Srilata with us. And I make this observation that having a good chairperson makes all the difference to bringing out the best in the speakers.
Yes.
Yes, to bringing out the
highlighting whatever's left out. Yeah. Highlighting whatever is left out. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, because this is my area, so I'd love to talk about it for as long as anybody wants.
And how long have you been in Singapore now?
I moved here in 94. Yeah. So it's been very long. It's been very long. But I do go back to India. I grew up in Delhi, but then everyone left Delhi. So I go back to Chennai, where I never lived. So that's another story. I guess I can tell you that story another time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yes, thank you, Aparna, for introducing us to Uma.
And thank you, Aparna, for introducing me to the group. Yeah. So Aparna has just texted, I think, yeah. In the chat.
Actually, Preeti, what you said about Uma is so perfect because, like she has that experience. It's not only just theoretical for her, but she's also actually experienced many of those things. And what she did, I mean, I'm sorry to digress a little bit, but her play, which she read out for Masala Chai Meanderings, was so nice, and it was so, all these concepts were woven into it so kind of seamlessly, and also very creative. So,
Hey, thanks for that, Aparna. You remember that place still. It's been a while.
That's another point, students. Whenever you research, do something that's close to your heart.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was supposed to do a monologue today. I started writing, then I came down with a bad stomach flu, then I only half wrote it. Then I'm glad that we had Sangeetha and Vinitha, right? Yeah, that was wonderful. So I'm glad that I didn't really go ahead with my monologue today, but maybe some other time that'll happen if possible. Yeah. So right, thanks so much for having me here. So is there somebody who's going to conclude it or how?
Yes,
Preeti, are
I
you
just
concluding
want
it?
to mention a few people who are important to
Sure.
in tandem. Aparna Srinivas, Rufus, who's not with us today. Rufus is the Associate Professor of English, Madras Christian College. He's the patron of our club. Because we advanced it, he couldn't be with us. And yeah.
Okay.
So I hope you get to meet Rufus sometime, and Srilata. So these are our three constants. So grateful.
Happy to be there. Happy to be with students all the time.
Yeah, that's true.
And
That's
research.
true,
And
absolutely.
research. Yes.
So I think I wish you all the best with your postgraduate work and postdoctoral work, maybe for Priya. And then go ahead. And I think you've got very good, you are all in very good hands. You've been given a lot of things to talk about, and Preeti has just given you more things to think about. So go ahead and do more research on this.
I just want to take one more minute. Faculty of Queen Mary's College, if you'd like to introduce yourself to Uma, please do that.
Okay.
Just a minute, whoever wants to.
Sure.
Because they are doing a lot of work. I mean, we have very good faculty who are like Urmila's into mythology and comparative literature. I just wish they could just come up and introduce themselves.
Hello. Hello, good evening. I just enjoyed the session and learned a lot, from all of you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Urmila. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Sumati, she's here. She's in info-criticism. Sandhya.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes,
Hello,
Sandhya.
this is Sandhya here.
Yes,
I really enjoyed the session. Very interesting, informative session. Good to hear all of you. Thank you, Preeti, for this opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you. Priya, Vasugi's friend, Priya.
Students, I think it will be very interesting for them also to know about the history. All this point of view is really enjoyed, especially the